Can I check your ticket please? My hand at the ticket that I had been touring around and my hands for the past hour to the flight attendant. She nodded at its approval before producing a sheet of paper from the file that she was holding in place in it inside my folded ticket. Had a nice flight, she commented enthusiastically, before handing my ticket back to me. And I grabbed my ticket and stared, folded sheet of paper inside my ticket, curiously before finding my seats. Once I had settled down on my seat, I removed the folded sheet of paper for my ticket and placed the ticket in my bag. Upon unfolding the sheet of paper here I realized it was a handwritten note. The handwriting seemed to rushed. I have transcribed the note from memory here. Rules for survive in this flight. 1. Do not speak of this sheet play. Passenger, you are the only human on this flight to check the time in your phone after reading the sheets. All rules will apply based on the time of your phone. 3. During the first hour of your flight, do not talk to anyone. People may try to talk to you, but ignore them completely for her. During the second hour of the flight you may start talking again, but if anyone mentions, do not look outside the window. Immediately run to the bathroom. 6 o'clock, if the screen of your entertainment console suddenly goes black, immediately look away and do not stare at 7 o'clock. During the third hour of the flight, the captain will make an announcement. Follow the instructions. 8. During the fourth hour of the flight, do not sit. Proceed. 9. If you make it past the fourth hour, you will need to spend the rest of the flight evading the chaser. You will know who the chaser is when you see them. 10. The captain will make an announcement until you play landing. As soon as you hear this announcement, push your way to the next door and open it. I love it. You will find that the outside is simply a black void. Jump into it without hesitation. The highway are the rules again. While Chuck Latina and did they give one of these to every passenger? Was I somehow randomly chosen for this prank? When I check the time of my phone and just do humor, the last 7:13 a.m., so this would be the first hour of the flight. Set in the young man watch over to my seat and sat right beside me and I give him a casual. The man didn't even bother to exchange a single word for me as he settled down in his seat and put on his seat belt, and he stared straight ahead and completely avoided me. I let him be and started to fiddle with my flight console. Some people just like to be left alone, I guess. Soon enough I started to vibrate to the entire cabinet, the plane. I started to accelerate until the G-force pushed me into my seat moments later and I felt the plane rising into the air. I am typically not scared of flights, but getting on a flight too always makes me a bit nervous. This time, though, my stomach was a nuts and beads of sweat were running down my forehead. My instincts told me that I was stepping into danger and I was my thoughts and that awful gut feeling it down to feeling a little creeped out by the note. The young man I loved it suddenly tapped on my shoulder. I jolted up like I had just been electrocuted, even through my jacket. His hand felt cold and heavy, like a dead person's hand. I turned around and faced the young man. His face seemed wrong. You know how those realistic human robots can creep people, and his facial features were just artificial in a way that I couldn't place. Maybe it was his eyes a little too big at the pupils, abnormally dilated, or maybe it was his nose, not exactly, and he's center of his face, or perhaps it was his mouth, very subtle blemishes in his facial features that made him look like something and trying to look like a human. And then you spell, okay, his voice was normal. Hey, do you wear headphones? Yes, that weird question to ask. Do you want headphones? I was about to open my mouth to speak when he spoke again. Why would you feel if I cut your hand off right now? What was disturbing wasn't the nature of the question itself, but the fact that he spoke in such a calm manner. It was as if he was asking me how my day was the son of the hour. My mind went to the list of rules that I had subconsciously been squeezing in my hand. The first rule said to not talk, no matter how much they try to talk to you. I decided to ignore the man. You seemed really weird anyways, and, if I was being honest, the list of rules wasn't the reason that I chose to ignore him. Me. Stop pestering me and return to work on his laptop. And I looked over at his laptop slowly and gasped at when I saw on a screen. He had a photo of me on a screen. That's it. It's nothing else. Just stay full open. Photo of me. And before I could process that properly, and I looked over at his keyboard and noticed that it wasn't a standard keyboard. In fact, it really wouldn't even count the keyboard, and it was made up of all these, all marked with the strange letters that I doubt existed. The man continued to stare at the photo of me on the screen, and it was then that I realized that the list of rules, it wasn't a joke. Suddenly a flight attendant popped out of nowhere and asked me, "So is this man bothering you?" "Yes, he is." I replied before my voice caught up in my throat, and under a second, everyone in the cabin and I snapped their heads around until they were staring directly at me, their faces. They all looked wrong and human, slowly, their long and then left smiles and red tears. What are the rules on their faces? What moments before been a fairly typical flight and now turned into a nightmare. And I sat there, cornered to my seat as the entire cabin of people are. Their faces turned to me, eyes locked with me, reedies were rolling down the run, canny faces, and their lips were curled into it and possibly white smiles. The flight attendant that it straight to me and talking to her also did the same thing, now completely silent. I waited for them to jump me in to attack me, but they did absolutely nothing. The second straight I did a minute and get. The people just stared and they didn't make an effort to move. It looked like they were locked in place just staring at me. As the initial shock wore off and my ravaged heartbeat, I started to slow down. I started to think about what to do. I had obviously broken the first rule, but apart, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming across some unexpected turbulence. Please remain in your seats to stay safe. And his voice was monotone and devoid of emotion. Every single syllable made the hair in the back of my neck stand up, and everyone in the cabinets dismiss my presence at that moment and return to their usual things. The cabin returned to normal, and I nearly convinced myself that I just had a very realistic nightmare, and it wasn't until I saw the young man's laptop next to me that I realized it wasn't over yet. His laptop was still the same, with the keyboard from another world, and, most importantly, he still had a picture of me on a screen, and you continue to stare at it and tap the keys on his keyboard. The captain will make an announcement. Follow the instructions, the rules sheet state at. The captain would make an announcement during the third hour of the flight. Yet as I checked my phone, I realized I was doing the first hour of the flight, either breaking the roll of change, the complete course of things, or the rules. She is simply give me account for all scenarios. I just really hope that the latter was true, because otherwise the precious rules she that was supposed to get me out of here, and now I'll be worthless. A sudden jolt across the whole cabin and interrupted my thoughts. The captain had a lie about the turbulence and fleeting moments. The entire plane was shaking. There was nothing against looking through the window in the worlds, apart from during these second hours. So I pulled up the blind on Play Tiny Circular playing Wonder Woman cast. When I saw the outside, all I saw was a thick black void that seemed to undulate like a rich black velvet. I saw the lights from the plane start to get warped and twisted as the beams traveled to the void. Don't get me wrong. The void wasn't just completely black. No, it was the best I can describe the void's movement. It's like an ocean of thick black waves. My mind went to every sci-fi movie and book that I ever read and entertained the thought that I was inside a wormhole or perhaps a black hole. How the regular Boeing play a man is to not get crushed in this physics-spending space. Was it impossible question to answer? I slowly turned my head away from the window. It took a lot of willpower to look away, as if something from those inky black depths that hypnotized me. Yet everyone in the cabin seemed to completely oblivious to what was happening and continued to go on about their regular business. I checked the timeline and my heart skipped a beat. An entire hour had passed and just those few moments I spent looking out into the void. I quickly looked over at the rule sheet to see what I would have to do for the second hour of the flight. During the second hour of the flight you may start talking again, but if anyone mentions the window, do not look outside the window in any circumstances. While the rule did state that it was okay to talk, I really didn't want to talk to anyone in this cabin. I also read the rule about going to the washroom. When I heard a child crying and also not looking at my in-flight entertainment console the screen turns black and I'll see him to pretty standard stuff and I thought that I'd seen the worst already here and this gave me newfound motivation to follow all the rules to the. I started to head out to the washroom to relieve myself and, knowing that I would be busy during the third and fourth hours of the flight, as I was walking to the washroom, a woman frantically caught up with me. She seemed to absolutely frightened. "Hey, are you also stuck here?" she asked, while looking at me up and down. "Did you also get the set of rules?" I said, "Yeah, can I have lost the sheet? Can I just read yours?" She played it. I considered it for a moment and decided to give her my sheet because she seemed really desperate. It felt good to have someone else being the same situation as me, because now I could rely on someone else to help me out. I gave her the shit and she thanked me profusely. Yeah, after giving it a quick read, much my relief, she handed a badge to me. "I'm Sarah, by the way here. We need to get out of here and I think our best bet is following these rules." "That's right and I'm glad I'm not the only person here on this flight," she said about the others. While they don't seem human to me, she seemed to have calmed down a bit too quickly. It felt like she was putting up a facade, but I chalked it up to being on edge from these situations. "I guess we got. Let's hear the sound of ruptured my eardrum." Sarah seemed unfazed by the sound. "I guess it affects a different people differently." Soon enough it was the third hour of the flight and the captain and made another announcement and his emotion is a monotone voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, please proceed to the front of the plane." And absolutely no one in the cabin moved. I liked it Sarah, and she nodded at me and giving me the affirmative to go to front, and we both started to walk to the front of the plane. They seemed to rows and rows of people comfortably lounging in their seats. No one seemed to have even heard the announcement. "Matthew," in front of the plane and I saw the door to the pilot's cockpit was open and I walked inside with Sarah right behind me and I noticed two things. One, there was no pilot and two, outside the plane I could see him with turn lava, crisscross in the dryer at like rivers and purple trees died in the barren landscape. I stared into the outside, shocked at the otherworldly landscape. The place wasn't uninhabited, though large concrete buildings were concentrated in several areas where we had arrived. I had no idea. Sarah started to laugh behind me and was at that moment that's all the piece of the puzzle together in my head my reel. She know what time it was on my phone, even though she never checked it. There is no way she could have known which hour of the flight it was, and she had her own phone when she never did. She wasn't affected by that shrill, high-pitched screaming in the cabin and she was acting way too much. You know exactly what was happening. Both my shoulders. I realized that the list of rules had me when I broke the first one. Add, change the course of things in those rules, no longer at a time frame. Sarah continued to dig your nails into my shoulders and pierce my skin after my jacket. She leaned in close and whispered it, I am the chaser. I was stuck in a bit of a pickle. The chaser had tricked me into a travel to another dimension. I probably would have had a panic attack, continue to dig into my shoulder, and they stabbed through my jacket and my skin. She seemed to possess inhuman strength in the way she easily punctured my jacket, and then my skin was just a blunt nail. But as I slowly turned my head around, I realized Sarah was really just a facade. She had transformed into something else entirely. Her skin was gone, completely white like a sheet of paper, and your fingers now ended in jagged as sharp yellow fingernails. Her face and warped into a misfigured eyes, nose, and mouth that barely resemble the Sarah that I had gotten to know. But I quickly placed her back against her and kind of fell on her to push myself in her out of the cockpit. You don't really know what you're capable of until you get that adrenaline surge. The survival situation. When your primal instincts take over here, you don't think about anything that you do. And then, as soon as I was free from her, grasp my rat. I won't bore you with the details of the next 30 minutes of me running back and forth around you, playing and to avoid the chaser. At first I thought the other passengers would react, maybe catch me or something, but they were all gone. The entire plan was empty and it was only me and the chaser, and I was starting to get tired and lose energy. Yet broadcast it over the PA system once more, and the plane is landing at our destination. Please unbuckle your seat belts. The chaser took one final look at me before I disappear into the back of the plane and puzzled me how they can't do it in the plane, and I thought that I had seen the worst already. So I decided to walk to the front of the plane and check the cockpit again. Is the door to the cockpit was open and I can see a single man with his back to me operate in the controls. He seemed to normal enough, but after what I had experienced on this plane, and I know the last person I wanted to bother would be the captain, and I swear that I saw him turn his head around and look at me as I turned around and walked back. The plane landed, a ventless, and those emergency rubber slides also opened up to service exits and a place where there were no airports. Before I left the plane, I salvaged as so much food and water as I could. Some of you may say that I should have stayed in the plane. While that would have been a good move, how long would I last there? Days, at the most weeks. It's best that I get myself used to this new dimension that I found myself in, rather than sit there and then look for food when I was starving. And, of course, and I still can't forget about the chaser, who I believe is still on the plane. The land was an endless red desert, the only thing that stood out in the landscape, where the occasional purple tree is. In the towns of the concrete buildings, the heat was unbearable, but I looked at the sky and saw 3 large suns in different positions, all radiating their heat and lights out of this planet. The ground was incredibly dry and I doubt the place ever received any rain. In fact, there were several ravines that were filled with lava and mountain. I couldn't even survive a day in the seat and I already completely soaked my clothes and sweat. I started to walk over to the closest concrete city that I can find, and it only took me about 10 minutes to walk there. But those 10 minutes were absolutely, as I struggled to keep on walking in the heat, the beans from the 3 suns of brandy, skin on the back of my neck, and tears as I walked for those 10 minutes. Just when I was about to pass out, I found this shit play concrete building and I threw myself into it. The relief was instant, and while the temperature didn't suddenly drop, it was 100 times better than being out in the open. And I finished an entire bottle of water and 1 sip and continued to lie down on the floor, nearly passing out from exhaustion and the heat. And I didn't notice the suited man when he had watched in front of me. "Welcome to hell, lost soul." He said that, "Can you tell me 1,000,000 times, and he was born of it." He wore a black suit, even in East Walter and heat, and didn't seem to be a tiny bit uncomfortable. I asked, clearly confused at this man's statement, and may have been the heat getting into my head, though, because that would have not been confusing to me and what actually explained the previous events. Oh, yes, this is hell. You're an unexpected visitor, though usually we keep track of who's coming in town. Similar to what a teacher would use when their student asked a dumb question. No, don't worry, though. It's not a rare occurrence to have people that come and go. I'm not sure if you'll be able to leave, though, so I'll set you up with what you are going to have to do for eternity. He said that as if he was just doing his regular job. What do I have to do? I asked, unable to fathom the horrible task it must be. We'll take you under the ground, with you being said, run. Your world will consume your fear and eventually your soul is sustenance, he said, and a cold stone. And I immediately stood up and began to run, but no matter how far I ran, the man seemed to be right beside me. He wasn't running, no, he was just standing still waiting for me to give up, and I tried my best to keep going. But useful trained, he didn't make any better. I was far away from the play concrete city now, but the man's son of these snapped his fingers and I was back under the shade of the building. You can't escape. You smiled, and that's how I learned about the first rule of there is no escape. But I got out tonight. How old would I be telling you this now? All I can say is that I'm extremely lucky you. The man snapped his fingers once more and we were down in a vast underground cellar. I saw people being attacked in each cell by unimaginable creatures. I got a headache looking at those creatures and cannot look at them for a long time. The geometry of their bodies didn't make any sense. They had completely different parts. They weren't even composed of earthly colors. These were new colors that I had no words to describe to this day. I will never get these screams in that cellar out of my head. As the man watched me through this horrible place, and I only had one word in mind, why, your souls are very powerful and we feed on your fear and suffering. If we didn't do this, the other thing, your reality would not exist. As a return for letting you live a life on the paradise and known as Earth, you give us your souls. Don't worry, though, this doesn't happen for eternity. Eventually, your souls are fully consumed in no more than empty hot. Google find plenty of wasted souls roaming around up above. The man explained, so there's no heaven, and I pleaded, what about God? There is no heaven. God is long left your kind behind. You can sit as your kind of failure, and that's us deal with you as we pleased. I stood there in the underground chamber as a suited man told me about the afterlife and how it works. You know what's worse than that, though? Monday mornings, okay, maybe not, I was quite literally died, and now this man was going to check me in a salad for all of eternity. Except that didn't really happen. And don't worry, you really think we waste souls here first? No, at first we make them work, make them keep the barrier between your reality and our strong listening away the worst of my worries. And then, almost immediately, a weird being made entire fly to paradise, to us and the being, and did not have a definite shape, and looking at it, it was like looking at the sun, and it seemed to stand there and communicate with these suited men before leaving with the snap of his fingers and these suited men, and teleported us away from that chamber, and we were now instead inside what I could only guess were one of the concrete buildings. There's been a mistake, you think? The man said in sorrow. What happened? I asked, and then suddenly the world I started to warp around me as of reality was still a body of water that was now rippling from an interruption. Colors started to swirl around like watercolor, and before I knew it I found myself in the plane again with the sheet of rules clutched in my hand and the same young man and next to me. I've been given a second chance. In this time things would be a little different. I immediately looked away from the young man and ignored his cries for attention, nearly caught my attention and made me turn around and tell them to just shut up, but I stayed, put it in the state of my lap. Suddenly the young man I brought his head on my lap and stared directly into my eyes with those uncanny features. I could feel my hearts and my throat, as he is slowly, and my mother's voice as his voice shift and try to avoid the completely disturbing features of his face so close to me by closing his eyes, which only made him angrier. And it seems the creatures had no way to touch me here until I know it's them. So I thought I was safe. The other rules were a breeze to follow, except for the chaser one. The chaser was still Sarah, and she started to come towards me as soon as the hours. I continued to run, but Sarah followed after me, calling for me. I try not to get myself into a dead end and continue looping around the seats until the hour had passed. My legs are tired and I was utterly defeated. Soon the captain and made a landing announcement, and this time I managed to jump into the void. The void accepted me as it started a rapids around me. All he could see was a thick ridge of some sort of machinery and tried to focus on it until I realized what it was, and I woke up at a hospital bed cover from head to toe when a cast. Apparently I've been involved in a serious car crash. The doctor said that I was dead for a total of 3 minutes and I am miraculously survived. You might ask me play. I didn't tell the Dodgers about my experience, while they would never believe me. After years of rehab, I gave me the ability to be able to do most things in life, and everything started to become normal again. That is until these suited men visited me again. It was a cool Saturday evening and I was going for a walk in the park to try and push myself to improve my health. My athletic ability hadn't been the same since the accident. You walked over to me and I play Frost is. He held his hands up defensively in front of them to signify he meant no harm. I just want to explain some things, he offered as sincerely. You were never supposed to go to hell, even it wasn't your time. Yet when these souls' time comes, it is taken to hell, then a sort of purgatory. You could say in manifest differently depending on the person, and your own unique purgatory was the plane, the flight attendant, that they gave you the list of rules realized of the year and gave you the list to give you a chance to fight your way out of the purgatory and return to earth. It was not in our power to return you ourselves, and therefore you had to do it. I found you an hour on, accounted for her, and I was ready to put your soul to work on. Another higher being told me to send you back in the plane and give you a second chance so that you could return. He explained, and cool, but why do you find the need to tell me that? I asked. Because your time has come for real and I see it as a personal responsibility. To finish off what we were on to last time. He said, as his lips curled into a smile full of my life, that I ran away from the man immediately, but I know that my death is near. Molly can tell you guys is to enjoy your life while you still have it.